the Masoretes did not create the version of the Bible. They had traditions, and their goal was to determine which of the traditions should be accepted and which tradition should be denied.
Shalom and welcome to Hebrew Voices. I'm here today with Professor Yosef Ofer of Bar-Ilan University in Ramat Gan, Israel. He was my PhD supervisor, and so he is my teacher. He's also the vice president of the Academy of the Hebrew Language. Shalom, Professor Ofer.
Shalom, Nehemia.
It's wonderful to be here with you today. I'm really excited. You've got a really important book that recently came out, and let's just show the people here. It's called HaMasora Lamikra Udracheha, but don't freak out because he has an English translation as well, which is the Masora on Scripture and its methods. And if you're studying the Masora, which will explain what Masora is, he'll explain, this is right now the definitive work. This is it. So this is a key text that you need to be studying. Professor Ofer, let's start with a really basic question. You wrote a book on the Masora. What is the Masora?
Masora. Okay, so the Masora was created in the 9th or 10th century, and its goal is to preserve the version of the Hebrew Bible. Mm-hmm. Now, decades in the centuries ago, there were many differences in the version of the Bible. If we go back to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we can see that even two scrolls that were found in the same cave in Qumran differ from each other in many details of the Bible. Mm-hmm. Now, the Masoretes believe that the Bible should be only with one version. If there is some dispute, they have to decide what's the right version, and they did it according to using some of the accurate books of the Masora, and then they had to determine one version of each word in the Hebrew Bible, and then they had to guard this version and prevent any error that may occur. Mm-hmm. So they used different ways, different methods to create these procedures of keeping even the spelling of each word, if it's written defective or plane. So they wrote many notes, comments in their books to keep the accurate version of each word.
So I want to back up a little bit. You said there are differences between two scrolls in a single cave in Qumran. Yes. So are we talking about, and I want for the audience to understand, what is the level of these differences? Yes. Is it that one version of, I don't know, let's say Exodus says that it was written by Moshe and the other said it was written by Shimshon? Or what are the types of differences we're talking about?
So we refer to that as the starting point of the Masora. And then if we go back to Qumran, there are two scrolls of the book of Isaiah. Both of them give the same text, but there are many differences in spelling and even differences in adding some other letters. In sometimes one or two words are added. That's the same. Basically, it's the same text, but there are many differences. Even if you every line that you go, you find some differences. Mm-hmm. If you go to the Septuagint, and that's another evidence of old Hebrew versions of the Bible, and you reconstruct the Hebrew origin.
Wait, tell them what the Septuagint is. Let's assume they don't know.
Okay, the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. Mm-hmm. It was very ancient. It was created about the 2nd or 3rd centuries BC. And then if you go back and try to understand what was the Hebrew background of the Hebrew text that was translated into Greek, you can find out that there are many differences, even more serious differences of adding some verses, some sentences or so. And now, when the Masoret created what we called the Masoretic version, they took every dispute and they decided. It's like psak halacha. It's like in the
A religious decision,
yes,
legal decision.
Yes, there are many disputes in the Mishnah, and then came the later generation, and they decided what is the halacha, what of these two versions, two opinions is to be followed, is to be the halacha. And the same methodology was created also in the version of the Bible, and very soon they succeeded to create a Hebrew version of the Bible which has no disputes about verses, about sentences, about verse, which the only differences are in adding letters that are not read. For example, a word like shomer could be written with 3 letters, shin mem resh, or with 4 letters with an additional vav, shin vav mem resh. Now there is no difference in the meaning of these two forms, but they try to determine exactly according to the tradition in which word in the Bible the word should be written with 3 letters, and in which other verses it should be written with an additional vav. And then they wrote out lists that determined these decisions. So they wanted the Sifrei Torah, the Torah scrolls, to be uniform, and also the reading of the Torah and the whole Bible to be uniform. So if we can read a word with kamatz or patach, they should determine what's the right reading of this word.
So if there was a dispute about the vowel, and this may have been, were the vowels written down in the period that you're talking about, or are they still?
It began in the period that the vocalization signs were not created. And then the Masoret created the written signs for the vowels and for the cantillation, the melody of the reading of the Bible. And they were not allowed to write them down in the Torah scrolls because the Torah scrolls were holy and no changes could have been done there. So they created another type of books, which is called mitzchafim, or codices. So, and then in these codices, they wrote the whole Bible with vowel signs and with cantillation signs. So the oral tradition of reading the Bible will also be kept and be also uniform.
So it's not that the Masoretes invented the vowels.
Yes.
The words were pronounced in a certain. I'm asking.
Yes,
Did they already exist, or did they say, we don't know if this word is shvu'ayim or shivim or shvu'im, so we're going to invent a pronunciation, or they already had it and they wrote it down?
The Bible was transmitted from many generations in 2 ways, in written form and in oral form. And these 2 ways are going together, because everyone that goes to read the Bible used the written scroll, and then he had an oral tradition how to read it. So there were some, we know about many reading traditions, and today also we have some traditions of Yemenite reading, or Sephardic or Ashkenazic reading. And so in these ancient periods we have a Tiberian way of reading the Bible and a Babylonian way of reading the Bible, but each each school made its signs, special signs. So we have Tiberian Nikud, and also we have the Babylonian Nikud in other books. And during the generation, the Tiberian tradition became the only one that was used all around the Jewish world.
Well, I mean, in Yemen, they continued to use Babylonian in some form, right?
Yes, sometimes.
And we'll get to Babylonian because you're actually one of the world's top experts in the Babylonian Masora. And
doctoral thesis about the Babylonian Masora.
Right. So hopefully we'll get to that. But I want to go back to you talked about in the two Isaiah scrolls, one Q Isaiah A and one Q Isaiah B, and they have differences. And I asked, is it the difference of whether it was Moshe or Shimshon? And I just want to be clear. So we weren't talking about that kind of difference, right?
No.
We're talking about whether there's a vav in the word shomer or not.
In my book, I checked some lines of these two scrolls and compared them, and found about 15 or 20 differences in 5 or 6 lines. But they're all small differences, tiny differences of adding some letters, maybe one word that doesn't exist there and exists in the Masoretic version or something like that.
So when you say the Masoretes, they went through this process where they made the biblical text uniform down to the exact letters.
Yes.
I want to understand, was that an arbitrary thing where they said, we want this to have a vav, or was it, what was it based on? How did they decide that? Or do we not know?
We have an ancient Baraita that's speaking about 3 books that were kept in the temple.
And a Baraita is a source from the Tannaitic period, swimming up until the year 200 approximately. Okay.
And this Baraita says that these 3 accurate and holy books of the Bible, they differ from each other in 3 words. And so they took, in each case, they took the majority, the 2 scrolls against the 1. So if in 2 scrolls it was written Na'arei, the boys of Israel, in one it was written Za'atutei, so they prefer the version of the 2 scrolls. And I think that this Baraita is typically not only speaking about one historical case, but it's the way that it was used during all generations. The Masoretes did not create the version of the Bible. They had traditions, and their goal was to determine which of the traditions should be accepted and which tradition should be denied.
So in other words, okay, let's look at that example. So it's Exodus 24, verse 5, and it says, "Vayishlach et na'arei b'nei Israel," and Moses sent the young boys of the children of Israel, vaya'alu olot, and they brought sacrifices. And in one manuscript in the temple, instead of na'arei, the children of the young boys of the children of Israel, it said za'atutei, which also means children. But it's a completely different word.
It's just a very different word. It looks strange that such differences occur, but there were such differences. And if we go again to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we can find differences in the same biblical text, something like that.
So here's an example that Professor Kucher of Hebrew University brought decades ago in Isaiah 13:10. So it says, Ki chochvei hashamayim uchsilehem, the stars of the heaven and their maybe constellations or something, lo yahelu oram. And it has a strange word, yahelu. What is yahelu? They will shine, I guess, from the context, and it's related to the word hilel, which bright one maybe. And then in 1Q Isaiah A, it has lo ya'iru oram, which is just the normal word for to give lights. So
then if we are going back to these scrolls, we have the 2 versions, and we don't know what was the original. It may be that the very simple word ya'iru is more understood, and maybe it was the first, but maybe just the opposite, because we had a special word that some scribes did not understand what it means, so they altered the word with a common word that in the same thing. But however, the scholars may think that one alternative is the original or the other one, but they have one solid fact. What was the decision of the Masorete? We have the biblical version, which is presented in the Aleppo Codex, and which is also presented in general in all printed books for the last centuries. They all did not use the Qumran ancient scrolls. They did not use the Septuagint Greek translation. They used the tradition which came out of the Masoretes, and in all books it will be written Yahelu Oram. Doesn't means that we are sure that was the most original word that Isaiah used. You can, as a scholar, you can correct the version of the Masora. You can accept it, and you can write many articles about that. But one fact is solid facts exists. That the decision of the Masora is Yahelu in this example. That's how all Bibles are printed, and that's the starting point of reading the book of Yosef. If someone wants to assume, to think that to suggest corrections, what should have been the original version, it doesn't. It may be very interesting, but it cannot be a fact that will change the printing of the Bible of today. What we have today, the Masoretic version, represents the decisions of the Masoretes, and if we want to know what is the Masoretic version, we have to go to accurate manuscripts like the Aleppo Codex, like the Leningrad Codex, like other codices. In some places, we will find some differences among them, and the question will not be what is the original version that Isaiah spoke and wrote. The question will be what was the decision of the Masoretes, and which of the codices of the Masoretes represent the decision of these Masoretes. Most of cases, the differences will be only in tiny things of imot kri'ah, of some letters, Vav and Yud, which do not change the meaning. And then we can use the Masora comments, which also appears in these same codices, in many places of these codices. And these comments helps us to reconstruct what was really the decision of the early Masoretes.
So this is fascinating. So I'm going to summarize, I hope correctly, what you just said.
Yeah.
You're not working on, in your research, what did Isaiah write or say, or someone wrote about him.
Yes.
You're working on what did the Masoretic text or the Masoretes determine was the official version of Isaiah.
That's right.
Okay,
and
wow.
If you go, and that was the decision of the Jewish nation to get the work of the Masoretes. And then, if we are going to print, I want to speak about my late teacher, Rabbi Mordechai Breuer, who created a new version of the Bible. What does mean a new version? He went back to the manuscripts of the Masoretic. He took the Aleppo Codex, he took the Leningrad Codex of the whole Bible, and other ancient codices. He compared them, and he tried to find out what was the version of the Masoret. it's not far off the version that was printed before in Venice in the 16th century or in other printed books, but there are differences in plain and defective spellings, in some punctuation signs. So I believe that his work represents better the decisions of the Masoretes, because he used manuscripts, ancient manuscripts from the period of the Masoretes, and one of them is the Aleppo Codex, which was created by the great Masorete Aharon ben Moshe ben Asher, who was well known among the Masoretes. They all said they are relying upon, also Maimonides relied upon his work. And if you examine his manuscript, the Aleppo Codex, you can find out that it is better, more accurate than other manuscripts.
So we had the opportunity together in January 2020, just before the pandemic. We went to the Shrine of the Book in the Israel Museum, and we examined the Aleppo Codex directly. And
at least the pages which survived from, because we
right. The pages that survived we didn't examine, or maybe they survived but we don't know where they are, right?
Yes.
So let me ask this question. When we examine the Aleppo Codex together, you say it's the most accurate. So this raises an interesting question. What are you comparing it with? And I know the answer, but explain to the audience. In other words, a lot of people say, oh, the Aleppo Codex is the Masoretic text. So if there's something in the Aleppo Codex that's right or wrong, that is what the Masoretes determine the Masoretic text to be. And you're saying it's the closest to the Masoretic text. So what does that mean?
So I'll go back again to my teacher, Rabbi Breuer. He said, I don't know that I don't use the Aleppo Codex because it has a prestige or something like that. I want to examine to see which of the ancient manuscripts is more accurate. And the method will be to examine the Masora comments and to see which of the manuscripts implement correctly the context of the Masora comment in the biblical version of his own manuscript. That means,
so explain what the Masoretic comments are, because I'm sure a lot of the audience don't understand what that means.
So let's go to the cases of defective and plena spellings.
Explain first what defective and plena is. Assuming that you mentioned the example of shomer can be written with a vav or without a vav.
So the Masora can say that one word. Let's take one example.
Perfect. You wrote a book about it. Let's see what the book says.
Okay.
And on the website, nehemiaswell.com, we'll put a link where you can go and find this book on Amazon or wherever it's available.
Okay.
Hopefully it's on Amazon, or it's a De Gruyter. Or we'll put a link
edition
to wherever it's sold.
Okay. So let's take the word vayireu, and they feared. The same word is written in some verses with two yuds, vayireu, vav yud yud reish aleph vav, and in other verses in the Bible, the same word in the same meaning is written defective only with one yud.
So defective is when it's written without one of these letters like yud vav or hey, and plena is where it has more of them.
Okay. So now the Masora comments try to describe the places in the Bible, the distribution of the two ways of writing. And it says in the book of Samuel, the defective writing is common. And there is only one exception, and it gives the exception. In all other books, the distribution is the opposite. Most cases are written plena, and only 4 cases are written defective. So the Masora gives an exact description of all the times. There are about 20 occurrences of the word in the whole Bible, and according to Masora, it gives us full details about these 20 cases. Now you can go back to the codices and find out which of them follow these instructions of the Masora. And then you may find in many cases that the Leningrad Codex does not follow these instructions. It differs in one word or two from these comments. And even if sometimes the same comments is written somewhere in the Masora of these manuscripts, but maybe it's written in the book of Samuel, and then we go out to the book of Daniel or the book of Chronicles, and you find a word that was not written according to the rules of the Masora, which are accepted by all manuscripts. So you can conclude that the version of the Aleppo Codex is nearly complete. It always follows the instructions of the Masora, much more than the other manuscripts that were compared.
So in other words, they took detailed notes and they recorded detailed notes of this word is spelled this many times this way and that many times. Even though it doesn't change the meaning, they wanted the fixed exact spelling. And then you go and you compare the manuscripts and see which of them which of them follow those instructions.
Yes.
And you're saying the Aleppo Codex is the close. So it's not that it was Aaron ben Asher and his prestige. It was that this is the one that fits the Masoretic notes closest.
That's right. That was the finding of Rabbi Breuer. And I thought about that. I don't think that it means that Aaron ben Asher was cleverer than other Masoretes. But how did he succeed to create such a book which follows the Masora in all cases? Let's take the examples which we spoke about earlier. If a Masoret wanted to copy this comment, this Masora comment, he had to copy 2 or 3 lines. He can do it in 2 or 3 minutes. Now, if he wants to check if the context of this Masora, to implement it all over the Bible, he should read the whole Bible. He didn't have a concordance, he didn't have a computer. He had to find out where this word Vayiru appears all over the Bible. And then you have to make sure that in each case of these 20 cases which are spread all over the Bible, each of them follows the instruction of the Masora. To do that, you have to work some days or maybe more than days to verify that one comment of the Masora is implemented perfectly all over the Bible. So we know about the Aleppo Codex that it was a personal manuscript of Aaron ben Asher, and during all his lifetime, he checked it again and again. We can see that the Masora comments were not written in one time, but he added from time to time other Masora comments, additional Masora comments, and then he also corrected the spelling in many cases, and that's why his manuscript was so accurate, because he checked it again and again. The Masoret of the Leningrad Codex, we know his name, Shmuel ben Yaakov. We know that he wrote many codices. He signed his name on many codices. So he was an expert in copying, in writing Masora, in creating new Masora comments. But he worked and he wanted to complete one book and get his money for his work and go on to create another one. That what his work was, to copy books, to copy the Masora comments, to complete and then to create many codices of the Bible. Aaron ben Asher had one personal book which he worked about his version all over his life, and I think that's the explanation why it was found so accurate in comparison with other.
So you're saying this was his personal copy?
Yes.
That what did he use it for? The Aleppo Codex was Aaron ben Asher's personal copy, you're saying?
Yes. I'll also add that it was not so common to write a whole book of the book of the whole Bible. It's a very heavy book with about 600 or 500 leaves, so it's a lot of work. Many other codices were contained only the Torah, or only the former prophets, or only parts of the Bible. The Aleppo Codex is a codex that contains the whole Bible, and it was written very, very nice in nice letters. It was not the letters were not written by Aaron ben Asher. He took an expert scribe who knew how to write very nice letters, but then that was the basic of his work, the work of the scribe, his name was Shlomo ben Boya. And then Aaron ben Asher got his work and not only added all the punctuation and cantillation signs and the Masora notes, he also checked every spelling all over the Bible and corrected where it should have been be corrected according to the Masora.
So when he had these notes, like you gave the example of Vayir'u, which is written with 2 yuds or with 1 yud, if he found a place where it was written wrong, he would fix it.
Of course, yes. And
okay.
we can find such cases in the manuscripts where the spelling was written something like plene, and then someone corrected it, and you can assume that it was Aaron ben Asher himself that corrected the planning, and then sometimes he added a Masora note, which is connected with his change of spelling.
Okay, so here's the quote from Maimonides. I'm just going to read this. So he describes, at the time of Maimonides, the Aleppo Codex was in Cairo. And he says, the manuscript that we relied upon is the famous manuscript in Egypt that contains the 24 books, which was in Jerusalem for a number of years ago to proofread manuscripts based on it. Everyone used to rely on it because Ben Asher proofread it, checking the details in it for years. And he proofread it many times. And he says, as has been reported.
We have to emphasize that Maimonides didn't know personally Ben Asher, who lived
100 years
100 years before, about 250 years before. But these traditions, he heard about the Aleppo Codex, and he knew that it was when it has been in Jerusalem. It became a famous manuscript and a very prestige manuscripts, which people relied upon. If someone wanted to be sure what the version is in some word, he went to Jerusalem, he asked to see the manuscript, and then he got an answer to his question. So Maimonides heard about that and knew about that. He also said that Ben Asher corrected his version. Maybe he saw it in the manuscript himself, some correction. Maybe he got a tradition, an oral tradition about this. But Ben Asher worked in Tiberias. After his death, his codex moved to Jerusalem and was kept by the Karaim, by the Karaite leaders of Jerusalem, and then everyone wanted to see something, went to them and got a permission to check this famous manuscript. And then when the Tzalbanim, the Crusaders came, they took it with them, and then the people of Cairo redeemed the manuscript, and
they ransomed it from the Crusaders.
Yes, and that's how it came to Cairo. And now we have to go to Maimonides. In what purpose he himself used the Aleppo Codex?
Yeah,
he wanted in his halachic treatise, Mishneh Torah, he wrote about Hilchot Sefer Torah, how to write a Torah scroll. And he said that you have to follow the spaces of parashiyot, ptuchot ustumot, open and closed sections, according to the tradition, according to the tradition of writing. And that you have to put every space in his, not to omit any space and not to change its form from stuma to ptucha or vice versa. So Maimonides says there is some problem about that, because the Torah scroll in his generations differ from each other according to the about the spaces, about the spaces of the parashiot. So Maimonides say that he wanted to solve this problem, and he wanted to follow one tradition, which is very, very important, which is so he relied on the Aleppo Codex. He made a list of all spaces, all parashiot of the Aleppo Codex in the part of the Torah, in the Pentateuch, and he wrote it in his halachic book Mishneh Torah.
So what we're talking about here is when you get to the end of a thought in the Torah, there is a space, and there's two types of spaces, open and closed ones. And what Maimonides was saying is these have to be reproduced perfectly in a Torah scroll, or the Torah scroll isn't valid for reading in the synagogue, and everyone's doing it wrong, so he relied on the Aleppo Codex.
And it's not so simple, because there were many traditions all over the Jewish world, and there were many disputes in his time. We also, when we look at the ancient manuscripts like the Aleppo Codex and Nehemia Codex, the spaces are not identical. We can find different sorts of parashiot in these two, comparing these two manuscripts. Or if you go on and compare other manuscripts, you find out many, many differences. So the Maimonides not only decided that the Aleppo Codex is a good tradition that should be followed, he had to convince all the Jews all over the world to leave their local traditions and take the tradition of the Aleppo Codex and prefer it, and then write new Torah scrolls according to the Aleppo Codex. It's not so simple, because you cannot imagine that in 1 week they will decide, okay, Maimonides is right, let's take all our Torah scrolls and put them into the Gnizah, and so we have to read the Torah in the next Shabbat. What will we do? But it cannot be done in 1 week or in 1 year. But during some generations, many communities who wanted to write new Torah scrolls follow the list of parashiot in Mishneh Torah. So they followed the Aleppo Codex, because this list was relied upon the Aleppo Codex. And then they began to write more and more Sifrei Torah according to this tradition of parashiot. And in some generations, they looked at their old Torah scrolls, and they say, oh, there is some scrolls that do not fit the halacha of Maimonides, so they put them in the Gnizah, or maybe they even corrected them and tried to adjust them according to the traditions, the list of Maimonides.
So it's interesting. So when they looked at one of these old Torah scrolls, they probably thought, oh, this is a mistake. But at the time it was written, it might not have been a mistake. It just wasn't. It was following a different tradition.
Yeah. So as I said, it took some generations, and the main fact is that new Torah scrolls were written according to this list of Maimonides, which was very, very stable. That I'll speak later about that. How did Maimonides succeed to create a list that would not be another case of version, would not have disputes in copying it, and it will remain stable as it went out of his hands. But he succeeded. He did that with some sophisticated manners. So during the generations, most of the the new Torah scrolls were written according to this well-known list of Maimonides. And then, if you skip some generation forward, people, the old Torah scrolls, maybe they didn't use it because the Torah scroll after some centuries became it became pasul again because the ink goes down and the
ink fades and it becomes invalid for use.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe that it became such procedures that in some synagogues all the Torah scrolls were written, were new scrolls that were written according to the Maimonides, and that's how this tradition overcame. But maybe in other places, most of the Torah scrolls were according to Maimonides, but they found one or two Torah scrolls that were written according to another tradition that were old or were copied from old other codices. And that was the question, what to do them, to take them out of use, to say that these are Sifrei Torah Psulim, or to try to correct them. But what we know, the end of the story was that all communities of the Jews in Yemen, in Sephardic and Ashkenazic, they got this tradition. So all the Torah scrolls today over the Jewish world are all written according to the Aleppo Codex, because as copied by the list of Maimonides.
And there's a certain irony here because part of the Aleppo Codex is missing.
Yes.
And specifically, most of the Torah is missing. And so all we really have is the list of Maimonides to know where the open and closed sections are.
We have another evidence, and there is one or two or three cases which have to be checked, because we have the evidence we have about the Aleppo Codex is not exactly what the Maimonides writes. So I'm not going now into details, but in one case, there is a dispute between the communities, between the Yemenite Torah scrolls and the Sephardic and the Ashkenazic in Leviticus chapter 7, where to put a parasha. And in that case, maybe that Maimonides failed in copying, in arranging his list, and skipped one parasha. And so maybe that there is one place that our tradition is not exactly that of the origin of the Aleppo Codex, but we cannot be sure that, as you said, these pages, this list of the Aleppo Codex are not exist today.
Or if they exist, we don't know where they are, right? There's theories about.
Okay.
Do you know where they are?
I don't know where they are.
Or if you do, you can't say.
No, I really don't know. Okay. I will be very glad if someone will find them. I don't believe that there is a high chance to find them out, because we know that the Aleppo Codex was complete till 1947, and then in riots that were in Aleppo, in the city of Aleppo, it damaged. We have one piece of leaf from the book of Exodus that was torn, was kept by one of the members of the Aleppo community in New York, and then we have it today. It is presented in the shrine of the book of the Israeli Museum. So we know that the Aleppo Codex was damaged in these riots, and I think that most of the leaves were burned or damaged in these riots. Maybe that some other leaves were taken by someone, but the fact that in the last 40 years nothing has been found. So maybe I hope I will be wrong, but I don't see a high chance that these parts will be found in the future.
And the thing you're talking about from Exodus is it was a Jew who had fled from Aleppo,
Yes.
and he, I think he was a taxi driver, I want to say, and he went around in his wallet with little pieces of the Aleppo Codex laminated, and when he died, I think his daughter turned them over to the Israel Museum, and you examined them and authenticated them, right?
In the 80s, I got a picture of this part of page, which was not taken over from its cover, but it was just photocopies. So I published it as it was, as I got only the photocopy of it. And then when it came to Israel and was delivered by the daughter of this man to the Israeli Museum, so I checked it again, and I saw some letters and some Masora comments that I was not able to see where it was only scratched and photos as it was before. However, that's a remaining of a piece of one leaf in the book of Exodus. We have some photos, I think 2 photos of one page of Genesis and 2 pages of the book of Deuteronomy, the 10 Commandments. And that's what we have about the Torah, except of the last 11 pages that survived, and we have them, which contain also the Song of Azinu.
Which is Deuteronomy 32. So let's now go over to, so you examined these pieces of the Aleppo Codex when they came into Israel, and how did you end, one of the things you examined, and I know because I was there, is the Sassoon Codex. Tell us how you ended up examining this. How did that happen?
Yes.
That you got to examine the Sassoon Codex.
Okay. So Sassoon Codex was known for many years in the 20th century. It was bought by David Sassoon in the beginning of the 20th century, and a photocopy of it was known to scholars. Also, I spoke about the Bible edition created by Rabbi Mordechai Breuer. He used 5 or 6 ancient manuscripts, and one of them was the Sassoon Codex. It's also a codex that contains the whole Bible. There are not so many. The Aleppo Codex and the Leningrad Codex, that's the 3rd ancient manuscript of the Masoretes that contained the whole Hebrew Bible. Some pages are not complete, but it contains most of the pages of the Hebrew Bible, about more than 90% of the text of the whole Bible. And it's one of the important manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible. Now, when it was kept by David Sassoon with other ancient manuscripts, many thousands of manuscripts which were in his collections. And after his death, most of them were sold. And then this codex, the Sassoon Codex, was bought by someone, but no one knew where it is. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I got a phone from Mr. Safra in Geneva. And
Geneva, Switzerland.
Geneva. And he said, I own this manuscript. I want you to examine it and to write something about it. I took this opportunity to see and to examine a high quality photo of this important manuscript. And also later, I with Nehemia, we both went to Geneva and saw the original. And now, years after, I wrote I prepared an edition of the Masora, of the all Masora Magna of this manuscript, and a research about these manuscripts. And then the manuscript was put into an auction, and then some month ago, it was sold to Museon Anu in Tel Aviv, and that's I'm very glad that these important manuscripts will be kept now in Tel Aviv by a famous museum, which will be kept very well, and then scholars will be able to get to see the manuscripts, to examine the manuscripts, and all the people, the crowd, will be able to look to see this manuscript, like the Aleppo Codex, which is presented in Jerusalem. So we have two famous Bibles of the Masoret period of the Masoretes, one in Jerusalem in the Shrine of Book, and one will be in Tel Aviv in Museon Anu.
So you had a major discovery with the Sassoon Codex about the two Masoretes. So tell us about that. That's
okay. So when I examined this manuscript, I found out that it was not a work of one Masorete, but of two Masoretes. The first one maybe was the one the scribe who wrote the manuscripts and the science of Nikud and cantillation science, and he also wrote Masora notes. Not so many Masora notes, but he wrote in 2 lines in the bottom of each page. And then came another Masoret, which was maybe a better Masoret. It was later in maybe some decades or years later, and he took these manuscripts and added many other Masora comments. He used the top of each page to write Masora comments, and also added some lines in the bottom. And then he, after working and completing the Masora of about 100 pages, he changed his mind, and he wanted to write more Masora comments. So he erased all the work of the first Masoret in the rest of the Bible in order to write his own Masora comments and to use all the space for him to write many Masora comments. He did so in some about 200 pages, and then for some unknown reason he stopped his work. So many pages of this codex remained without Masora Magna, only with Masora Parva, or also there are some pages without Masora at all, because this second Masoret, which we don't know his name, did not complete his work.
So we don't know his name, but he mentions a name. You want to tell the people about that? What's the name he mentions, the second Masoret?
Yes. He in one Masora comments, only in one place, he mentions the name Aaron ben Moshe ben Asher. And he cited a long Masora comments from the Aleppo Codex. He said, I copied these comments from the work of Aaron ben Asher in his book, in his Bible, which is named El Taj. El Taj means the crown. So, so that's the one ancient source that gives us the name El Taj as referring to the Aleppo Codex. So we can conclude that in the 10th century, where this Masoret, I think, acted at the end of the 10th century, the Aleppo Codex got the name El Taj HaKeter, dedicated expressing his importance as his uniqueness of this manuscript. And then the Masoret of the Sassoon Codex cited a long Masora comment, which we cannot find today in the Aleppo Codex because it was written at the beginning of the Codex in a special page, a long list of names. But we know about that from some sources that copied this Masora.
So it's from one of the pages that's missing, but it was copied before it went missing.
Yeah.
And so what's in the Sassoon Codex matches what was copied before it went missing in 47.
That's right. It was copied by Professor Cassuto, who went to Aleppo and copied a part of this Masora. It was also copied by the Karaite known scholar Avraham Firkovich, who also went to Aleppo and copied all the beginnings, the first pages of the Masora, which were in the Aleppo Codex. So we have many evidences about the Aleppo Codex, and we can use them to reconstruct, to have much information about the version of the missing parts of the Aleppo Codex.
So you mentioned Cassuto, Moshe David Cassuto, or Umberto Cassuto, he was known as well.
Yeah, he was a rabbi in Firenze, in Italy, and then he came to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in the first years of the creating of the Hebrew University. And one of the tasks that he took is to print a new Hebrew Bible. And he thought about using the Aleppo Codex. So he went to Aleppo and examined the Aleppo Codex. He did not succeed. He didn't get a photocopy of the Aleppo Codex. And he, in 2 or 3 weeks that he was there, he could not copy all the details of millions signs of the Aleppo Codex. So he could not really use the Aleppo Codex for his work. But he wrote some notes, and after his death, I examined his lists, and I published all the information that he copied about the missing parts of the Aleppo Codex. What we know now.
So this is important because he was a witness to things that no longer exist, or we don't know where they are, or they don't exist. And he went there, I believe it was at 1942 or something like that. He went there.
It was
43.
43.
43. And in 43, the Aleppo Codex, those pages weren't missing. They were there.
Yes.
Wow. It's been an amazing conversation. There's so much in here. Not just in here, in your head, there's so much, but there's so much information in this book. I want to give an invitation to the audience. The Masora and Scriptures and its Methods by Professor Yosef Ofer. I want this to be just like a small taste and to continue and delve deeper into this. It's an incredible work here, incredible body of information that you could spend years studying this book. And as you study it, you'll get deeper and deeper into the details, the fine details of the text of the Hebrew Bible.
Of course, other scholars that worked here. And I tried in each chapter to add some references. So if one is interested, he can go on, not only what is written in this book, but the sources that I relied upon and other sources that can be continued.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.